Shalom and good evening. This is TV7 Israel News broadcast to you from Jerusalem. And in today's top stories, Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz voices Jerusalem's deep appreciation of the unique bond between Israel and Germany. The U.S. negotiating team to the nuclear talks in Vienna is reportedly embroiled with internal disagreements about the diplomatic approach towards Iran. Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amirabdollahian rules out any direct negotiations with the United States unless an agreement favorable for Tehran is regarded as tangible. Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz spoke with Germany's Defense Minister Christine Lambrecht yesterday, during which the two top defense officials reiterated the important collaboration between their defense establishments, militaries, and industries, as well as the unique bond between Jerusalem and Berlin. Furthermore, Ministers Gantz and Lambrecht discussed regional challenges, with emphasis on the Iranian threat and its destabilizing behavior, as well as opportunities to support cooperation with regional partners. It is important to know that earlier in the month, the German defense minister visited German forces stationed in both Iraq and Jordan as part of Operation Inherent Resolve, whose mandate and mission officially aims to eradicate the remaining remnants of the Islamic State in this region. And while the deployed troops have been subject to repeated attacks by Iranian proxy militias seeking to force the US-led coalition out of the region, Minister Lambrecht pledged Berlin's determination and commitment to sustain Germany's proactive role and deployment. Separately, during a joint press briefing with visiting U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Berlin, Germany's Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock seized the opportunity to voice her country's frustration with the Islamic Republic of Iran over its malign behavior in the nuclear sphere, which is the root cause for tensions surrounding the nuclear talks in Vienna.
Die Verhandlungen in Wien kommen nicht in eine entscheidende Phase, sondern in die entscheidende Phase, weil die Zeit uns im wahrsten Sinne des Wortes davonläuft. Nicht zuletzt deshalb, weil der Iran parallel zu den Gesprächen leider weiter an der nuklearen Eskalationsspirale dreht. Eine Urananreicherung von 60%, wie die im Iran bereits erreicht hat, ist beispiellos für einen Staat ohne Atomwaffen. Und dafür gibt es keine plausible Erklärung und dafür liefert der Iran auch keine plausible Erklärung.
It is important to mention that while Secretary Antony Blinken asserted that he held discussions with his German, French, and British counterparts on steps that would be jointly taken if Iran refuses to return to compliance with the agreement on terms that are acceptable, he stopped short from responding to a question on whether the Russians are playing a constructive role in Iran. The question was asked in light of last week's meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Iranian counterpart Ibrahim Raisi, that was subsequently followed up by Foreign Minister Hossein Amirabdollahian and his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov in Moscow.
Безусловно, наша специальная встреча с вами подчеркивает особое значение, которое наши руководители придают внешнеполитической координации на многих направлениях. Я уверен, что наши переговоры сегодня будут полезными для конкретизации тех задач, которые поставили президенты наших стран, и для продвижения на многих направлениях, касающихся региональной и глобальной повестки.
After a subsequent meeting, which Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov held with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on tensions related to the Ukraine front, the latter announced during a so-called press availability in Geneva that he urged his Russian counterpart to use its influence on Iran to impress upon it a sense of urgency.
I have to say that Russia shares our sense of urgency, the need to see if we can come back into mutual compliance in the weeks ahead. And we hope that Russia will use the influence that it has and relationship that it has with Iran to impress upon Iran that sense of urgency, and equally that if we're unable to do that because Iran refuses to undertake the obligations that are necessary, that we will pursue a different path in dealing with the danger posed by Iran's renewed nuclear program, a program that had been put in a box by the agreement that we had reached in the past, the JCPOA, and that unfortunately has now escaped from that box as a result of us pulling out of the agreement and Iran restarting its dangerous program.
While the Biden administration acknowledges a critical phase and hopes to secure an agreement with Iran, differences have emerged among the U.S. negotiating team over the scope of compromise which Washington would be willing to concede to Tehran. In a report initially published by the Wall Street Journal, U.S. officials confirmed that the Deputy Special Envoy for Iran, Richard Nephew, has left the team, alongside at least two other officials, who demanded a more stringent negotiating stance vis-à-vis the Iranians, in contrast to the top American negotiator, Rob Malley, who has been repeatedly subject to criticism over his conciliatory approach. Per the report, citing people familiar with the negotiations, strains within the U.S. team have been growing since the summer over a range of issues that have been debated and sometimes decided on at the highest levels of the Biden administration, including some in the team reportedly urging a departure from the talks in early December after the new Iranian negotiating team reversed most of the concessions that the previous government in Tehran made in the spring of 2021. And while the U.S. State Department did not immediately respond to TV7's request for comment, Western diplomats, in a conversation with TV7, corroborated the contents of this report. In related news, U.S. Envoy for Iran Robert Malley said that the United States is less likely to return to the 2015 nuclear deal with Tehran, while 4 innocent Americans are being held hostage by Iran. In an interview with the London-based Reuters news agency, Malley further stressed that even as the U.S. is conducting talks with Iran indirectly on the nuclear file, it is also conducting indirect discussions with them to ensure the release of U.S. hostages. In response to Malley's remarks, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Saeed Khatibzadeh asserted that the Islamic Republic has not accepted any preconditions since day one and will ignore these matters being brought up.
جمهوری اسلامی ایران هیچ پیش شرطی رو از روز اول نپذیرفته و طرح این موضوعات رو اگر تنها برای مصارف داخلی و رسانه‌ای باشه ازش عبور میکنه و الا پیام قطعیش همواره این بوده که مذاکرات رو باید به اندازه کافی پیچیده هست، نباید با اظهارات پیچیده ترش کرد.
Separately, Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amirabdollahian mentioned during a press briefing in Tehran that only viable prospects of a good agreement from an Iranian perspective would move the leadership in Tehran to consider the possibility of reintroducing direct talks with the United States.
طرف آمریکایی از طرق مختلف پیام‌هایی رو به ما ارسال میکنه که خواهان سطحی از مذاکره مستقیم با جمهوری اسلامی ایران هست. ما مذاکراتمون با 4+1 هست. اگر در روند مذاکرات به مرحله‌ای برسیم که رسیدن به یک توافق خوب با تضمین بالا لازمش این باشه که سطحی از گفتگو رو با آمریکایی‌ها داشته باشیم، این رو هم نادیده نخواهیم گرفت در برنامه کاری که در مذاکرات برای رفع تحریم‌ها خواهیم داشت.
The Ayatollah regime's top diplomat went on to criticize the 3 participating European powers who have reportedly been more hawkish than their American counterparts when it comes to the political will to concede to Iranian demands.
انتقاد ما از 3 کشور اروپایی عضو برجام این هست که هیچ ابتکار جدید سازنده و رو به جلویی رو در مذاکرات ارائه ندادند. البته تلاش کردن در مذاکرات هفته‌های اخیر ما منطقی و با رفتاری سازنده ورود بکنند.
Minister Amirabdollahian went on to acknowledge that the Islamic Republic is nearing a point of no return vis-à-vis its nuclear program, which would demand of it to make a political decision on the way forward.
مذاکرات ما به نقطه‌ای داره نزدیک میشه که مذاکرات فنی ما در آینده نچندان دور به حد اشباع میرسه و ما بایستی تصمیم سیاسی بگیریم.
Meanwhile, in Washington, U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price responded to a question on the assertion by the U.S. envoy in relation to American hostages being held by the Ayatollah regime in Tehran.
What the special envoy said is that it is, quote, very hard for us to imagine getting back into the nuclear deal while 4 innocent Americans are being held hostage by Iran. This is the point he has made repeatedly before. So this should not be news. It also, I can tell you, is not news to the Iranians. They have heard this position indirectly from us before as well. But the special envoy also made the point that these issues are operating on separate tracks. And they're operating on separate tracks for a very simple reason. A mutual return to compliance with the JCPOA is, at best, an uncertain proposition.
Thank you for watching us. As part of TV7 Israel's prayer initiative, I would like to encourage you this evening to join the team and me here in Jerusalem to lift up Germany in prayer for its salvation and peace, alongside prayers for our persecuted brothers and sisters worldwide, in addition to our ongoing prayers for the peace of Jerusalem and the salvation of Israel. I'm Jonathan Hassan, wishing you an Erev Tov U'Mevorach, and we will see you again tomorrow at the same time.